Summoners, and welcome to another ProGuides video. My name is Tia, and today we'll be talking about our predictions for the worst champs going into patch 11.14. While there are a ton of buffs and nerfs each patch, it can be pretty hard to actually know what's going to change and what's going to stay the same. Sometimes a seemingly huge nerf really just brings a god tier champion down to S tier, and they are still plenty OP. Other times, what seems like a minor 2 base AD reduction just causes a champ to drop off the rift. So we're here to steer you away from what we think are going to be the worst champs in each role this patch. Our first pick you may want to stay away from is Lucian. You'd think the removal of Stridebreaker's dash would be a pretty big indirect buff to ranged top laners, but Lucian is doing as poorly as ever. In the early game, he can be a really annoying bully, but any good laner knows you just have to stick it out, avoid as much of his harass as possible, and he falls off pretty fast. Doran's shield and second wind are just strong options that most top laners can easily take. While that doesn't totally negate Lucian's damage, it gives enough sustain that the other top laner can safely pick up farm here and there and have enough HP to fight when their jungler comes. And that's Lucian's biggest weakness. While he is a really good bully in a 1v1 situation, the playstyle Lucian has to use to win lane is constantly going in for trades on the other top laner. This leads to him pushing in the wave, and with him constantly dashing in for trades, he's incredibly vulnerable to jungle ganks. Left completely unchecked, Lucian definitely can stomp someone into the ground, but with just a single gank, he falls behind and his opponent can usually just force all-ins after they reset for items. Our second pick is Yasuo. He's not objectively an awful champ, but he's just much better kept in the mid lane. The issue with him playing top is you just don't really get to utilize much of his kit. In mid lane, where most laners, even the melee ones, have some form of ranged ability you can block with Wind Wall, you can at least negate some of their damage. You also have the ability to dodge skill shots by dashing in and around the wave. But in top lane, most champs fight by throwing themselves at you, not skill shots. With nothing to wind wall or dodge, Yasuo is left in a position where his fights are completely decided by whether he can outdamage his opponent or not. And most bruisers, juggernauts, and even tanks can pretty much slap him around at all stages of the game, so there's not really much hope there. This has pretty much always been the case for Yasuo top, but especially now with Garion and Darius, some of his harder matchups getting buffed. Just stick to playing him mid. With Tahm Kench's new rework giving him his Abyssal Voyage pre-6, and it having CC attached to it now, a lot of people thought he may now have the kit for being a jungler. On paper, I kinda agree, but once you see it in practice, it's just really horrendous. The issue is he doesn't really do anything that a jungler should. His clear is incredibly slow, and his ganks are just really bad. His dueling is actually pretty good, but being that he has no way to close the gap, it requires the champ to literally run at him and fight him in melee range. He lacks any type of ability to control or pressure the map, and every other meta pick will take advantage of his non-existent presence. The strong early junglers will simply spam gank lanes and leave his laners blaming jungle gap. The strong power farmers like Fiddle and Karthus will be allowed to freely reach the point in the game where they can pretty much solo win fights. Tahm is getting some love this patch, but those changes will do literally nothing to affect how useless he is as he waddles around the map. Avoiding the champs on this list is a good starting point ranking up, but if you're actually serious about climbing, you should check out Proguides.com. Our top tier level coaches are available 24/7, so no matter what time it is, you should at least head over to the site and check it out. Our coaches have grinded the same ladder as you, and now they want to share their tips and tricks with you. So stop spinning your wheels on your own and get on the fast track for higher elo today. Now let's get back on topic, shall we? Our second jungler to steer away from is Udir. He's just overall a massive underperformer in the current meta. In the jungle, you have your early gankers and your power farmers. Udir does have traits of both styles of jungle. He has good damage early game, making him a strong duelist. But his ganks are kind of lackluster and he doesn't snowball like the other early game meta junglers. He does have a pretty fast clear speed, one of the fastest in the game, but as a power farmer, he just doesn't scale like the actual carries in the role. Some champs that try to cover multiple niches shine, but those champs are generally supports like Bard and Thresh. In the jungle, it's generally better to specialize in a single category. In the speed demon meta, Udir was able to be useful as a tanky disruptive force in teamfights, but with that meta gone, he's just been put back to his preseason 11 space of being outdated, awaiting his rework. Looking at some of the mid laners now, our first champ to talk about is Akali. Even prior to this patch, Akali is a champ that struggles outside of play at the highest level. She has a lot of tricks to master for clean comboing, and you have to keep track of things like your shroud duration and passive procs to get the most out of her kit. With this patch, they're removing the ability to use Q mid-E, meaning that her combos will be clunkier and slower to execute. On top of that, she's losing 45 damage off of her ult, meaning that she'll lose even harder against champs she already struggles against. Two of those champs, Katarina and Sylas, are honestly way more broken, higher in both pick and ban rate, and deserve to be nerfed a lot more than Akali does. But Riot did Riot things, and here we are. Syndra makes the list as our other mid laner due to her just not really providing much of anything. She falls somewhere between being a control and burst mage, but she doesn't do either very well. Mages in general just overall aren't too great this season, so when you try to split your identity like Syndra does, you just end up flopping. All of the meta assassins are generally safer picks, have a better lane phase with more kill pressure and priority to work with their jungler, and come online much faster than Syndra does. While Syndra usually needs Ludens and Sorcerer Shoes to 100% to zero a target, someone like Cat or Zed can pretty much all in and kill squishy targets with just a component. And besides squishy targets, Syndra just straight up sucks at dealing with the bruisers that dominate top lane so much right now. She doesn't have the burst damage to kill them in one go, and she certainly doesn't win extended fights against them. If you're gonna play mage, there are burst options like Annie, who have a way stronger early game, just as much or even more burst later on, and are just easier to execute. If you want a control mage, stick to Anivia, who can survive laning phase, stall games out, and has the damage to deal with tankier damage threats. Not too long ago, in a land far, far away, Syndra was an incredibly dominant pick, being a top 2 mid laner along with Orianna. Whether it was nerfs to their items, shifts in the meta, or whatever, the two plummeted hard down to rock bottom. I wonder what it would be to take them to bring them back up to at least being viable picks. And that brings us to today's question of the day. What reasonable buff would you give to a bad champ to help make them viable? For me, I'd like to see a range buff for Lucian. He's been on my D tier for a while in every lane, and I'd just like to see him at least be playable. But that's just me, and we want to hear from you all, so pretend you're on Riot's balance team and give us your best answer down in the comments below. Moving things down to the bot lane, we have Ziya. Ziya's identity is that of a hyper carry that has an insane amount of safety in team fights due to her ult and the subsequent zoning power she gets from her feathers. In a coordinated setting like pro play, where fights happen every few minutes, there's usually enough time between the fights for all cooldowns to reset. But in solo queue, we know that's not the case. Games are often very sloppy, with fight after fight happening in the mid to late game stages. There's just no way for Ziya's ult to be up every time it's needed. Just compare the numbers on her ult against some of the popular assassins. Nocturne, Talon, and Zed can all easily find a window when your ult is down and you're vulnerable to being blown up. Even after the Divine Thunder ranged nerf, Ezreal is a better option if you want a safe carry to play. On top of that, she's also heavily outclassed as a hyper carry, with Jinx and Cog leaving her in the dust in that category. The other ADC that's looking pretty bad right now is Kalista. The one thing I'll say about her is that she's still a pretty good pick if you're playing with a duo where you can coordinate your aggression, get a lead, and snowball it to the rest of the map. But outside of that, she's pretty horrendous. For one, most meta supports just aren't that aggressive in the first place. Janna, Lulu, and Senna don't exactly scream, "Let's fight all the time!" Thresh and Leona are still pretty popular, but unless you're on the same page, trading can be hard. And since Kalista needs to win lane to do well, dying or even just doing nothing in lane to get a lead can leave you being pretty useless. Kalista ult does have some pretty strong utility, but the cooldown is so long, you don't really get too many chances in a game to use it. Just like with Ziya, if her cooldown was lower, there'd be something to look at here. But until then, Ashe is just going to always be the better alternative. For our supports, the first pick we have is Karma. When you look at the stats, Karma is actually a lot like Akali. She's a major underperformer in lower elos, but at the top of the ladder, she has some pretty good stats. That's because, by design, Karma is an enchanter that is a huge lane bully, but massively falls off when you get to the mid and late game stages of the game. Yeah, her Mantra E's burst of movement speed may help along with an engage, or help to block a good chunk of AoE damage coming in, but that just doesn't compare to the other, harder scaling champs in the class. Just compare what Karma Mantra E does to an echoed Seraphine W. and her shield is basically all she contributes in later game fights. At that point, her damage has all but fallen off. Meanwhile, Seraphine has the potential for a massive chain CC, and other supports have their own buffs and peel they provide. So what does this all have to do with high elo versus low elo? Well, as I said, Karma's a huge lane bully. She's generally able to win just about any matchup, being strong as both a poke support and when you're going for all-ins. Losing 3 base AD is a huge cut to the damage that she can deal over time. This will make her even worse in the lower elos, and she may even lose favor at the top of the ladder, with the newly buffed Seraphine taking her spot as the go-to pick when Lulu is banned. Finishing off our list, we have Tahm Kench. Yes, we already had him on the list, but jungle and support are completely different playstyles. Since he was recently reworked, players are definitely doing everything they can to make him work in multiple roles, so we're taking it upon ourselves to say, stop. While the rework was definitely much needed, Riot kind of flopped on the delivery. Tahm's kit looks like something you'd expect on a jungler or a top laner, but he's just massively outclassed in those roles. And playing him as a support is even worse. Just like pre-rework, he just provides nothing in lane for an ADC to work with. In fact, now he can't even eat an ally to save them pre-6, and once he has ult, it's a full 2-minute long cooldown at rank 1. Riot's buffing him on this patch, but it won't change his ineffectiveness as a support. Basically, the only way Tahm Kench is going to be viable is if they buff his numbers tremendously, and even then, it will be in some other role, not this one. People may be chanting unbench the Kench with this rework, but I think they just need to unenroll the tadpole and find something else to play. And that about wraps things up for our worst 10 champs on patch 11.14. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to sub so you never miss out on our meta guides, so you're always in the loop on what the best picks are. Remember to let us know which champ you would buff and how down in the comments below. Oh, and one last thing, don't forget to check out our Discord in the description box below, where you can discuss League further or just hang out and be a part of our community. I can't wait to see you guys back for the next video, but until then, I don't know what food you should eat, but whatever food is pleasing to you, maybe a taco or an empanada, some lasagna, okay, all right, whatever it is. Enjoy it, and I'll see you later. Bye!